Thank you, Mike. So we do have quite the amount of people and growing rapidly. So what I want to do is if everybody could introduce ourselves in the chat, just for the sake of we only have 2 hours to get through our material. So your name, your recovery status, and your reason for being here, organization, whatever else you would like to add to it. I love it. And I will introduce myself to all of you. My name is Domenick Galarneau. I'm a person in long-term recovery, about 13 years now. And I'm a recovering opiate addict. I suffer from opioid use disorder. And I've been in recovery for 13 years, a little bit over what I used for. So that's a miracle in itself. I'm a CCAR facilitator. I'm the lead facilitator for the training team. I am also a recovery coach professional and a recovery coach professional facilitator. And I train naloxone. So I am also, I guess you consider, a harm reductionist. So I absolutely love harm reduction and I absolutely love people. So as we get started today, I would ask that everybody open their minds and open their hearts to what we're going to discuss today. This is going to be set up like a training. I want you to use me as a resource, and I will also use you as a resource. And I will be asking questions throughout our training, getting to know you and exchanging ideas on how we can grow as a community. Awesome. So we'll give another minute for everybody to start. I will pull up the slideshow here. Okay, so did everybody have a chance to put everything in the chat? Did everybody introduce themselves? Let's see what we have. Chat's looking pretty good. Okay. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad. I'm beyond honored and privileged to see how many people showed up for this webinar. I am greatly humbled that this many people showed up today. I was a little nervous when coming on. I absolutely love people and believe in harm reduction and believe that when somebody has given the chance to live, then they are given a chance to recover. And it's very, very important. Can't believe I got choked up. Listen, let's smile. Everybody give me a big warm smile. Let's welcome everybody. Let me get out of that mode. I just, this is so near and dear to my heart. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about harm reduction today, a pathway of recovery. Now, if you notice, I didn't say to recovery. I didn't say a roundabout recovery. I said a pathway of recovery, right? And hopefully by the end of this, you will feel the same. I'm not here to indoctrinate you. I'm here to offer information. And hopefully if we open our hearts and our minds large enough, we will be able to see that this is a pathway, okay? So let's work on our working definition of recovery. So always important to put, SAMHSA defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals. Okay. Do we have a question? I'm sorry. Okay. SAMHSA defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And here at CCAR, our philosophy is people are in recovery if and when they say they are. So this will be our working definition of recovery. Does everyone accept this? And if not, please explain. So as we speak about recovery, this will be our working definition. If you agree with me, please raise your virtual hand. Perfect. It looks like we're all in agreement. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Has everybody heard of CCAR's philosophy that people are in recovery if and when they say they are? Everybody's familiar with the philosophy. Good to see all of you people too, man. Like, I see so many familiar faces in here. Thank you for coming out and supporting, man. I love y'all. So since we are in agreement with that, I think we can move on to the next one, which is going to be a brief history of origin, which I thought was important to put in this. If anybody does not know where harm reduction came from. So one of the very first harm reduction models to be created was called the Mercy Harm Reduction Model. In the late 1980s in Liverpool, England. Shout out to my UK friend on here. I didn't know if you knew that, but here's a fun fact. The success of utilizing outreach workers, distribution of education, and providing clean equipment to drug users was shown to be the reason that drug users in Mercy were not affected by the HIV epidemic. Harm reduction focuses on evidence-based methods, is what I put in quotations. So my first question to all of you, does anyone know of any evidence-based methods for recovery? That whole top row, you got your hands up. Well, let me see. Risa, did you want to share? I can put your hand down if you want. I got you. And next up would be Amy. Amy, is your hand up? Did you want to share?
Yeah, it was left raised, but you said evidence-based evidence-based treatment?
Methods. So not practice or treatment. We're talking about methods.
Nope, I'm gonna pass. Not sure.
Okay. No worries, Amy. No worries. Thank you so much. Robin.
Hi.
Hi, Robin.
I believe reduced usage is a harm reduction method because it's a form of trying not to use 24/7, 7 days a week. So that would be, I would think, a part of harm reduction.
It is absolutely a part of harm reduction. Thank you, Robin. Meredith.
Yeah, hey Domenick. It could be way out 12-step. Is that a method?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you. So 12-step is in fact an evidence-based method of recovery. What is evidence? I know, Khalees, did I just blow your mind? I see the eyes. You're like, wait a second. Did he just do that? I did just do that. So absolutely. So is there any evidence in any of your lives here today? Anybody in a 12-step program that doesn't? Anybody else? Okay. All right. Is there evidence in your life that recovery is possible? Absolutely. There absolutely is. Thank you for raising your hands. We can put our hands down now. So my next question to you is, does anybody have any other ones? Because there's so many. Go ahead, Mark. Perfect. I can see you.
So needle exchange, Suboxone, medical assisted therapies like methadone.
Yep.
Harm reduction. Even safe injection sites have been proven to be harm reduction.
Absolutely. And we are definitely going to get into that, Mark. So
I'm still trying to find out where to raise my hand.
It's okay. Go ahead, Glenn. I see you.
Yeah. I don't see where I can raise my hand on the screen. Could somebody enlighten me?
Oh, so yeah, no worries, no worries. So there should be a part at the bar on the bottom that says reactions. Do you see it? It says reactions. It's usually got like a little smiley face on most. And it'll say reactions at the bottom.
Nope, that's okay. I don't see it. Transportation.
Give me more. What about transportation? So you're actually, so we're gonna get into that too. What about it?
Yeah, to and from wherever they have to go, whenever they have to get there. That's harm reduction.
Thank you,
And
Glenn.
it works.
Thank you, Glenn. And Jackie. Good to see you, Jackie.
Good to see you too, Dominic. I was gonna say rehab and therapy,
Rehab and therapy.
IOP.
Absolutely. There's evidence to back it up as a form of recovery, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Miss Higgins, awesome to see you.
How you doing? I would say cognitive behavior. Changing your
Therapy.
behaviors will get you to a recovery place.
So more specific, what pathway of recovery uses CBT as a kind of like a baseline?
For instance, the DOC.
Okay, besides for the DOC. It's okay if you don't know. I'll talk about it after.
Okay.
All right. Ed,
We talked about needle exchange. What about safe use environments, safe use rooms?
absolutely. Safe injection sites or safe consumption sites also called.
Exactly. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Miss Higgins, I was thinking smart recovery is a pathway that uses, I believe it's DBT and I forget all the, because I am not a clinician. I forget all the names, but it uses,
EDMR. EDMR.
DMR.
no, it's
EDMR.
cognitive behavioral therapy and then the DBT one, I believe.
DBT, EDMR is the new one.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jackie. And Todd.
Hi, Dominic. Thanks for doing this today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we, by definition in our organization, say anyone making a better choice is practicing harm reduction. And in particular associated with their drug use. So drinking and not driving is evidence-based harm reduction.
Mm. Yes. Yes, it is. Would it also be safe to say when you say about somebody, kind of cutting back on using our definition of recovery today, and I can always go back if everybody wants to look at it, are they practicing recovery?
By our definition, we would say yes.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah.
Now, does anyone here see that recovery is in fact harm reduction?
Yes.
So isn't recovery all encompassing harm reduction? Any form of pathway that you think about reduces harm to somebody. It helps promote recovery. It helps to promote change,
So isn't working.
right? All positives, right? So I'm going to put this one up. So the harm reduction model, just to kind of give some clarification on other things, right? The harm reduction model has been used in multiple ways, including driving safety. So when he said transportation, did you know that seatbelts was used for harm reduction? Awesome. So in women's reproductive health, birth control came off of the model of harm reduction, right? In sexual behaviors, or also known as safe sex, right? Condoms, things of that nature, dental dams, we'll get into all that stuff in a little bit, right? But it was adopted in the late 80s here in the United States as a way to combat the spread of HIV amongst IV drug users, but was resisted in the early 80s because of the crack epidemic and the demonization of drug culture. So, does anybody believe that we have a drug culture here in America? See a couple of thumbs up. But that's my question. Does anybody want to come on? It's okay to challenge me too. Go ahead, Khalees.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about drug cultures, the world has a problem with drugs. It's not just the United States. So are we just going to say that the world has a drug culture? Because I mean, the UK struggles, Scotland struggles. I mean, Dubai, Qatar. I mean, the world is struggling. So I don't understand. Like, that's just like, I don't want to label that the United States has a drug culture. That sounds very negative to me. I'm honest.
So go ahead, Mike. I'll let you go first, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I was trying to show y'all that if you put your hand up in front of the screen for a while, is a timer on the thing down there, and then put your hand up. It's cool. It's the coolest thing. But culture, you know what I think of? I was in middle school, 7th grade. The DARE officer comes in and he shows us a video, right, of peer pressure. And I'm like, what is this? Peer pressure? What neighborhood are you guys in? Because in my neighborhood, everybody greedy with their drugs. They get their stuff and run for cover. Ain't nobody sharing. Like shit. I was like, yo, where this neighborhood at? And I got suspended for that. 10-day suspension. Because I made noise. I was like, yo, what this dude talking about peer pressure? Like, what is this culture of peer pressure? Like, I've never been offered. I had to always ask, like, yo, can I get some of that? But that's just my view of it, right? I think that's what he's getting at. What's the culture? It's different cultures out there, right? And I believe that's how I look at it, right? People are dying from the same culture that's happening right now. And it's been happening for a while, right? And I look at it like that. Like the first thing that came up to mind is like, what's the culture, right? What is the culture? That's the first thing I thought of in my mind. Like there is different cultures, I guess, because nobody wanted to share.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So Khalees, let me ask you, so I know you think it seems like a negative, but I want to ask you, so you just said in the UK that there's drugs everywhere, right? So do you not feel that there's a drug culture? So I'm actually going to give you some drug cultures, right? Because I come from drug culture. So that's why I'm sharing about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll do that. So has anybody ever heard of hippies? Okay. Has anybody ever heard of ravers? This guy right here was a rave DJ. You're looking at him, right? And I was immersed in drug culture, and it wasn't seen as a negative. I loved being a raver, right? Like I absolutely loved it. I'm going to take your hands. You can leave. You could have left your hands up. I'm sorry. But I was immersed in drug culture, and I didn't find it to be a negative. That's where I chose to be at that point in time. I loved that scene. I loved to be there, right? So this is more or less, so as we go through this day, this is more or less, we're going to challenge our beliefs. We are definitely not going to agree today on everything, because there's going to be some really, really tough topics today, things that people sometimes are afraid to talk about. And I love talking about those things, because how do you grow as a community? Because we don't know what we don't know, right? Kelly, what did you want to share? You had your hand up before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I think of drug culture, I think of the 60s, man. Like, I think, well, if you think about it, every generation had their favorite substances. We had, the free love era of, weed and acid. Then you move into the 70s, people are starting to fool around with some smack and coke. 80s is all about that good blow. 90s, you've got people are shooting dope. It's like every generation and every, I guess, young part of every generation, not young, anybody that consumes substances, there's a favorite, there's like a drug du jour of each generation. And I remember like getting into it with my dad, because I'm 33, I'll be 33, my dad's 65. And he's like, back in my day, you know, nobody was messing around with like these crazy pills. I'm like, no, you guys were tripping on acid for 4 fucking days straight and waking up 2 states away. Like, how is that better? So I think it's all counterculture can be associated with negativity, but there is a pretty interesting harm reductive safe consumption drug culture that I know a lot of people in my area participate in, where it's like we keep each other safe. You know, people don't have to use alone, whether or not you are practicing recovery yourself or not. But I think that that's a big part of what we do as recovering people is we take these things that are historically bad, right? Or like gross or dark or seedy or sketchy, and we turn them into powerful tools of assistance to help one another.
Kelly, fantastic. Next time we're getting you on, dude. We're putting you live at 5. Fantastic. So, because that, everything you just said, right? Like, it's gone from generation to generation. So what is the difference between our drug culture and the drug culture of those days? Anybody, quick, it's a quick answer. And anybody's, what is the difference?
Overdoses.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Right? Because never in a time of drug culture have we lost as many people as we have since the 90s. Never in a time, right? And there has always been a culture, right? And to believe that we haven't had that culture and that it wasn't a part of people's everyday life, and especially those of us that have been using substances since I was 12 years old, right? And like, that was my culture, like marijuana, acid, everything that she just said, all that stuff, ecstasy, that was a part of my culture. And that's how I lived, right? Jennifer, you had your hand up. Good to see you, by the way.
Thank you. It's good to see you. I think there's also like an age component that goes along with this. You know, we kind of expect teenagers will experiment, and it's expected that they will experiment with like marijuana. You know, maybe moving on to alcohol and that kind of thing. The 20s, you may go a little harder, and that's where you might see the coke and the pills and things like that come in. And then I don't know, by the 30s or 40s, we're supposed to be over it and move on, be done with it. So there's the, that kind of perception, you like outgrow it or some stupid thing. And so there's a kind of stigma that comes in if you don't quote unquote outgrow it. I can remember hearing a lot while I was using the people that like, it's time to grow up. It's time to get over it. It's time to, I walked away from it. Why didn't you? Yeah. Well, I'm not you. Hey, but,
Right.
So I think there's parts of that, but also appearance. My parents were big time pot smokers. Huge, big time. But because they looked, with the nice hair and neat and clean and white collar and all of this, nobody would have suspected that like my mom was out, like, loved this stuff. Absolutely adored this stuff. Bought off of boyfriends that I had and stuff like this. Nobody would have suspected to look at her. She was an accountant. She had the business suits and all that other kind of stuff. And people who dress like that don't do things like that. So that also becomes, I think, part of the culture or way we perceive the culture.
And what you're talking about also is, and can't get too much into this, but it also demonized the whole culture. In
Yes.
the 80s. It demonized an entire culture of people, right? And we can't get too far into that because we have to stay focused on the thing. But it demonized another culture, right? So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So I want to ask you a question, right? Is there such a thing as a good or bad drug? I like it that everybody's saying no. Okay. So Or is it the relationship between the drug and the person using it, right? And this is a no-brainer, right? The disease of addiction, right? So there's no such thing as a good or bad drug. It's a disease, right? And we need to start, how do we battle stigma and the things that we face every day? I don't know about anybody else, but like, even in my own recovery community, because I'm so passionate about this, people stigmatized against me. They constantly stigmatize against me. They're constantly like, oh, Dom, you're promoting people using and you're this and you're that. And they say really outlandish things to me, but I will not back down on this because I love people. I will not back down. Go ahead, Meredith.
Thanks. Just a really quick question. Do you still get that? I mean, I imagine you have some time in recovery, you know, do you still get that?
Not ever since I started working at CCAR.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
given me a safe space to be who I am.
Okay. But like in 12-step, I don't mean to assume that you are in 12-step, but
I am.
yeah, is that the space that you were given?
You could save hundreds a year on groceries.
Not always. Not always. Believe it or not, I get it from people that work in the field. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. I didn't,
Yeah.
that was personal. I didn't mean to like.
No, it's not. No, Meredith, I love good questions. No, please treat me as a resource. The truth is that even people that work in recovery stigmatize harm reduction.
Wow. Actually, I could see that. Yeah. Okay. I have some sponsees who've been in treatment and they've told me what they've said, and yeah, they promote like 12-step only or something. But anyway, I'll let other people ask questions.
And believe me, 12-step is valid. I got my recovery there, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I won't go down that rabbit hole too much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we're really talking about the demonization of drugs, and you know, but I don't want to go. That's a little too political. We'll keep that out. But my thought process is, I don't believe that. I believe drugs and the demonization of that allow for incarceration and stigmatization towards our communities, and increases incarceration instead of helping those people who suffer from a disease, which there is no known cure. And that's the truth. Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, just to chime in on this conversation, when I think about what we're talking about in the stigmatization, it happens a lot. And just to piggyback on the 12 steps, the 12 steps program, the literature teaches us to be all inclusive in spite of, but the new literature has came out and talking about, and I think it was the old literature too. Now I don't want to just say it's new, that we are to be inclusive and to embrace all people. However, we as individuals, one way, and I used as an example, I was talking to a friend of mine who was driving people to and from their appointments from a treatment facility, and how irritated he was when the young lady that he took to the hospital, he just knew that she had coughed or whatever, had somebody come in because she was so long. And I said to him, and he was like, well, the program's not doing its job and all this stuff. I said, but did you do your job? Did you help her get just harm reduction? She may not get it right now, but we as people in recovery, especially coming from a 12-step background, are supposed to have this embracing and kind and loving response, because we forget, and I can talk about me, I'm a quick forgetter, that what it went and how many times people had to say something to me before the light bulb flickered. Not come all the way on, but just flickered. So when we're talking about discriminations, I think we in the 12-step programs are the most discriminatory people that there are. And when we get a pathway, we stick to it, and by golly, don't let somebody do something we don't do. Just don't do it. So it's really a struggle and a surrender every day, helping people go down this path. Harm reduction is really a safe way to do what people need to have and be the resources for them, and not the barrier or the challenge that's placed before them. I'm done. I'm off my soapbox.
Absolutely. No, beautiful. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much. So believe me, I always wasn't who I am now. Okay. I was very, very, very indoctrinated, right? Like I told you when you got in here, I'm not here to indoctrinate you. I'm here to open your mind and your heart to a possibility of something that you might not see, right? That's all. Glenn, go ahead.
First of all, I don't know if I look my age, but I'm almost 74.
You look great, Glenn. You look great.
Thank you. I went through my initial recovery 37 years ago. I took CCAR classes to be a recovery coach in 2015. And I had to learn about recovery all over again. Completely different. And here we go. I get in with my age. I remember my grandmother, my great-grandmother, bleeding her own opium poppies in the backyard and smoking them in a corncob pipe. That's real. Today, I ran a harm reduction office in Ionia County for 3.5 years until the funding ran out. We just didn't have, after COVID, we weren't able to keep the clientele up, and so they went on to Grand Rapids again. And I also work with the 8th Circuit Court as a recovery coach for both Ionia and Montcalm County. And therein lies what I'm really getting at. Today, we use evidence-based best practices instead of past practices. That's the court. Everything's past practice in the court. They got whole books, libraries that this judge said this back in 1874, so this is the way it's got to be. Well, the recovery courts, the treatment courts, are really now starting to look at it in a different way, and they're really using best practices and evidence-based practice. As much as people do beat them up, and they still need beaten up. I couldn't have any influence from the outside of the court, so I had to go inside and join the teams. And there again, this is harm reduction. Getting our judges to accept me running a harm reduction office and still being a recovery coach for their participants. So we're always walking a tightrope. Thank you.
Sure. For sure. Thank you, Glenn. We'll take Khalees and then Mark, and then we got to move on to the next slide.
I was just gonna say, because when you're like talking about demonizing, or I can't remember how you phrased it, and like it just really crawls under my skin, if I'm being honest, because like not embracing, harm reduction, pathways of recovery, meeting people where they're at, it really can lead to death. Like, and I hate to like go straight there, but like as someone who's just lost my best friend a month ago due to this addiction, her pathway of recovery was marijuana maintenance. But the recovery community, the stigma, the everything, like she's not here today. And like whenever I think about it, I've done a lot of training. I'm a facilitator myself. I'm a coach. And as I've been like reflecting over it, like I didn't care what she did for her recovery. I didn't even care if she wanted to call herself in recovery. I loved her just as she was. I just loved her anyway. And I think that that's what I get to now. Like it's if we just care a little bit more, if we just love them a little bit more and give them the compassion and heart, like I don't care what they do for their recovery. And so I think it's just really important because people don't realize it until they're impacted by it. But like our friends, our family are dying out here, and it's real, like real.
Yes, it is. And you just said exactly what I'm trying to get at. If we could just love people for who they are and where they're at, without demonizing them for having a disease. If we could just get there as a community, right? Mark, go ahead.
Thanks for that share, Khaleesa. That actually changed my share that I'm going to have right now. You know, I've been a coach since 2014 and training ever since shortly after that. And one of the things I always say to my class when they come in is like, you know, they talk about the highest ideal as being unconditional love for everybody. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but can you start to practice unconditional acceptance so we can really truly meet people where they're at. You know, when I came in for my 11 years as an IV drug user, my thinking was very, very black and white. And many people in the recovery community have found that their solution is very binary. I use and now I'm abstinent, and that worked for them. And when that's their experience, oftentimes because people's empathy is a subjective one, that when other people are not having the shared same experience, their judgment comes in. And they're like, well, you have to be abstinent in order to be in recovery, right? That's their reality. So they try to impress that on others. But as we found out that there are so many steps into that forest to become an addict, as good as I was, it's not always being airlifted straight out. Like there are steps to come back out of the forest, right? And harm reduction, that is those steps. It's getting housing, it's getting access to food and medicine, it's getting access to community instead of being marginalized, you know, living in the woods in a tent somewhere, and having access to people who are modeling that behavior. All those things are harm reduction that brings people back into a recovery model. And it's incremental, right? We don't live in a black and white world anymore. We live in the gray hues in between, because that's where people's truth is. And that's where we can meet them and help them along the way, right? That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Absolutely. Mark, all of that. I'm with you, man. All of that for sure. Okay, so we have to, so I just wanted to put this up for you. Go ahead, Lori. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, no worries. I'm gonna be off camera, but I have a brown face and I'm wearing a tie-dye dress. And when you said hippie, something rose up in me. But anyway, I just wanted to put in, and I put it in the chat. I'm a historian. And so this history is good and it's accurate, but both and. While this was happening, the Black Panthers were doing their work. They had been doing their work. They were tired of waiting for people to come and save them. They were tired of waiting for equity. So they were doing harm reduction while this was unfolding. So I need to say that, honor history. And a lot of times you'll find divides in harm reduction camps that folks only want to talk about people who still use drugs and not the origins of use, at least in the United States. And so I have to say that, and I just wanted to put that caveat in there. I put the link in. You can read all about it for yourself. Don't believe me, study it for yourself. But they were doing that work in 72.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Absolutely. No, Lori, thank you for saying that. So these links right here, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I wanted to give so much history, but we have so much to get through, and oh my God, it's already 1:42. So these links, especially this one, everybody sees these links. So this one here at the bottom, Harm Reduction Journal from Biomed, is incredible. And then this one too, harmreduction.org, actually, so I believe it talks about the Black Panthers, it talks about women's health, it shows from like the 60s on, like a way bigger. I was just mainly focusing on HIV and drugs, but there's so much other stuff, like the Black Panthers, it talks about how they were feeding people. Yeah, absolutely, Lori. Thank you for bringing that up. So if you want more knowledge, knowledge is power. Please snap a photo of these links, copy paste them, whatever you want to do. I'll give you a minute and look up these journals and these different things. And the top one, of course, is SAMHSA's definition on harm reduction. Awesome. So if you want to take out your phone, snap a photo, we're going to move on to the next one. All right. So what is harm reduction? Harm reduction.
Hey, Dom, excuse
Yes.
me. As soon as I got my camera ready, you switched. I didn't get to take a picture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, I got you. No, I'm here for you. There you are. Go ahead. I love the enthusiasm, Robin. Thank you.
Nah, I'm ready. I don't know about nobody else. I'm ready.
All right, we're all good. Okay. So what is harm reduction? Harm reduction is an approach that promotes health in a way that meets people where they're at. This is the mantra. So anybody else in here have that mantra? Oh, me too. Where's all my recovery coaches? This is our mantra. Meeting people where they're at. Interesting that this came from what? Harm reduction, right? Thank you, England. We love you. Shout out. So, Glenn, go ahead.
As far as meeting people where they're at, as a recovery coach, I also facilitate teaching recovery coaches in our area. But meeting people where they're at, yeah, they're again, I'm looking at this physically. Transportation. As a recovery coach, my office is my car, the front seat of my car. That's my office. Now, some people, of course, can't do that. My wife can't even transport in her own car because she works for a facility. I am subcontracted. So there's so much to it, but being able to talk to someone just driving down the road puts both of us at ease. And plus, they're getting where they have to go while I'm getting them there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Glenn. So let me just get through this. Robin, I'm not going to leave you hanging. Let me just get through these for the sake of time, because I have two impactful scenarios that I really want to get to in the training. Okay, so next up is accepting that not everyone is capable of stopping their substance use at any given time or has the desire to do so at that time. Okay. Understanding with non-judgment in regards to where we believe they should be in the stages of change. Everybody knows what the stages of change is, right? Coaches, clinicians, okay. Everybody knows what they are, perfect. Okay, so I don't think we have to get too much into that. Harm reduction focuses on promoting evidence-based methods for reducing health risks and to promote safety. Okay. So, examples: needle exchange programs, free condom and dental dam distribution, free physical and mental health care clinics, overdose prevention trainings, naloxone/CPR. Some of us are certified in both, which is a good thing. Group counseling or motivational interviewing. Interesting, huh? Motivational interviewing. How about that? Safe consumption sites. Examples: bars. Deer in the headlights. All right. Who didn't know that bars would be on there? Does anybody know the history of the safe consumption of alcohol? Kelly.
I am so happy that you put it there, because this is when people start swearing at me when I do my harm reduction education, is because if you are partaking in a legally regulated substance, you have to be doing it of age with proof of with verified governmental proof of your age, and it has to be distributed by a licensed individual in a place that is zoned and certified to distribute said legally regulated product. And when you ask people what that is, they say a syringe exchange. I go, no, it's a bar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this all started from back when prohibition happened, and we saw every type of crime skyrocket across the board. And so when they reinstituted alcohol consumption to be legal, it was with all of these new parameters around regulation, legal drinking age, taxability, all of the location of bars and consumption sites. But bars and sunscreen are my two favorite examples of harm reductive public policy. because we've been benefiting from harm reductive legislation and public policy our whole lives. It's just suddenly when you like stick a needle into it or it's a Black person, then it's like a big thing that now we have to like be scared. So dude, I'm so stoked that you put bar in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So, and do we know the history of the bartender, right? The bartender's job is when you reach a point of intoxication to cut you off. So when people tell you that a safe consumption site for opiates is a bad idea, remind them that bars have been around, like Kelly said, I believe, very shortly after Prohibition, right? So when somebody tells you that safe consumption doesn't work, just remind them that it's worked for a very, very long time. And with the creation of the Uber, we have done even better, right? So we also have fentanyl strips and bags. Does everybody know what bags are?
No, I don't.
Awesome, awesome. So bags are basically, man, I wish, you know what? I should have brought one in here. So bags are bags that you can actually put any substance in, any medication, any drug. It's got directions right on it. You open it up, you put it in there. It basically dissolves any drug and makes it non-effective. So that if anybody has read about, when you flush drugs in the drinking water and everybody's flushing, different drugs or whatnot, it can pollute our drinking water, right? So they tell you not to flush drugs down the toilet. Don't throw them in the trash. For the sake of animals and Mother Nature, don't throw drugs out there and, all that other stuff, right? So that's kind of where that goes to. But fentanyl strips, everybody knows what fentanyl strips is, right? Okay. So basically you can test your drugs for fentanyl. Okay, so we have peer support, recovery coach professionals, recovery support specialists, harm reductionists, and interventionists, which I've actually thought about before, which, I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie. Anyway, we'll get into that another time. We'll talk on the other side, but there's this awesome movie about this interventionist guy. Alternative to suicide support, right? We have antabuse. I can never pronounce the actual name of it, but antabuse is used for alcoholics, right? Disulfiram or whatever it's called. So I can never pronounce it and I'm okay. I don't know what I don't know and I am okay with it. That's why I'm here to learn on this journey of self-discovery with you. Vivitrol. Everybody knows what Vivitrol is, right? Okay. Medication-assisted treatment, methadone and buprenorphine, which, Suboxone, Sublocade, all those different ones for opiate withdrawals, right? Medical marijuana. Now we're getting into that. Okay, let's get it now. All right, everybody was like, whoa, hold on. We're getting into it, right? So medical marijuana, CBD and THC, right? Ketamine therapy, right? We have psilocybin therapy, the old magic mushroom, which is actually, if you read the studies, it's just absolutely mind-blowing how effective it is, okay? I'm not saying that Domenick knows my limits. I'm not saying Dominick's going on the happy trail, but for some people, it really, really, really is life-changing for them, okay? And the same with the ketamine therapy. And medical marijuana, though, is probably the most talked about and the most, which is very interesting, is probably the most stigmatized drug of all is marijuana, even since way back in the 80s. And again, we will not go down that way, but another drug that was highly demonized to a culture, right? So we will talk about discovering and managing. We're going to go to the three-legged stool, right? As coaches, one of our main things is to discover and manage our own stuff. So my first question to all of you is, have we left space in our art of coaching to coach someone that has chosen harm reduction as their path? I will take hands on this. This is a question to the whole group. Have we left space in our art of coaching? I see some heads saying yes. Robert, awesome.
So Dominic, maybe not related to the essence of use of substance, but gambling addiction, for example, where I do support individuals with a gambling addiction, where we hey, if you want to go to a casino, that's entirely up to you. If you want to game with your partners in the house, that's entirely up to you. But we throw around ideas of like, you know, can you limit yourself to a budget? Would you want to limit yourself to a budget? What kind of friends do you want to surround yourself with? Hey, do you want to play a game of poker with me? A friendly game of poker, you know, where there's no money involved. I know it's not relevant to the idea of substance, but gambling addiction too can bury people in holes. So in harm reduction, in that essence is, hey, play with me. It's a safe environment, no judgment, and you'll be able to socialize and try to build on some strategies. Sorry if it's not really relevant.
Dude, that is absolutely relevant. So is one addiction worse than the other, or is the disease of addiction a disease? Right? So I think all recovery is relevant, right? If something is causing you unmanageability in your life, is it not worth? And I mean, you asked fabulous questions. Every question you asked is questions we would ask somebody with a substance problem, right? Like somebody would ask me all those questions, like, do you think, you know, and for me, it might be like, you know, abstinence is the only way I can recover, or for me, maybe it's just not that, right? So maybe, you know, abstinence from betting is something that like that individual person has to do for their recovery. But that doesn't mean that everybody is going to fall into this blanket net of this is the only way type thing, right? So no, Robert, thank you for bringing that up. I think that is absolutely relevant. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to sobriety through harm reduction. I went to meetings almost daily, 12-step program meetings. But can put together more than a couple of days, but those like times in between still gave my body a break so that I could survive to get to, you know, whatever point I wanted to be at, which was certainly not where I started. But I am also coaching now on the team that I'm coaching on because of the evolution of my beliefs in harm reduction. I was getting sober during the AIDS epidemic. I saw a lot of stuff and I heard a lot of things, and it, you know, both pro and con, it really changed what I believe and how I approach things.
Awesome.
So it absolutely, I think is vital to being in recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Greg, how you doing, Greg? Good to see you, man. You're on mute.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure about this topic. I was way too close-minded because abstinence for me is the only option. But in writing these things down, Vivitrol helped, 12-step helped, and then what Jennifer just said, you know, an hour in a meeting is an hour not using. So yeah, I'm glad I came because it's been an eye-opener, that's for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. And I do love that analogy, Jennifer. That's absolutely right. 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, right? Like 1 minute, man. Sometimes it's 1 minute. Can we give 5 minutes? Like, you know,
Yeah, and it was different sponsors along the way who pointed that out to me, and I don't even remember who it was. Somewhere along the point, somebody looked at me and said, you know, that's harm reduction, right? And I'm like, excuse me, what?
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Mark.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure, is ART an acronym for something? Or are you talking about just our practice?
So yes, your practice, that is exactly the science and practice of coaching. Yes.
Yeah, I want to say that every time I'm talking with one of my recoveries, that's what we call recoveries, and they're talking about a harm reduction model, I always lean heavily into my motivational interview questions. Questions around that sound along the lines of like, So if you decide to walk down this path, what do you expect the outcome is going to be? Like, what are your expectations for this? How is it going to help you mitigate the circumstances you're going right now and help you start to heal from your addiction? And they'll list out several things they think is going to happen. That way, when I walk side by side with them over the coming days and weeks, I know what the expectation is. And then so when I ask that question, I turn to them and say, hey, so how's that working for you so far? Right? When they come back and give me answers other than what their expectations were, especially ones that weren't as good, that's time for the next part of that conversation. Like, what does this harm reduction model look like? How can we now improve it so that it's working better to meet your expectations, and then supporting them through it, right? So that's how I operate with people when they're going into the harm reduction realm. And I know for myself that I had to do it myself, right? If someone told me how to do it, that just didn't resonate the same as me putting my own thoughts into it, making my own plan, and walking through it and failing miserably. That was just the road that I chose as an addict. And I respect that that's often the same for my recoveries that I'm coaching. So I give them the same freedom to fail but they walk away with that wisdom, right? And so that's how I approach my recoveries. I let them learn the lessons. I don't steal the lessons from them, but I support them through it. And I'm a truth teller through it. And I make sure that they come out the other side supported so they can take their next step.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Mark just actually broke it down, right? Truth teller, roll with resistance, avoid argument. I mean, he basically just broke down the entire recovery coach model to you in 3 minutes. That was fantastic. Go ahead, Ed.
So this is such a great conversation this afternoon. So thank you, Dominic. I think what stood out to me on this slide is that managing. And I think for us as recovery coaches, or for me personally as a recovery coach, I am constantly managing my own stuff and making sure that I am in my lane and staying in my lane and ensuring that my boundaries are protected. The reason I say that is 45 minutes before we started this session, I got a phone call from someone who, since I'm in long-term recovery, he was sharing some things and some issues that he was going through. It was his birthday this week. He had 30 days. And suddenly he found himself drinking and passing out. And he was asking for some guidance and things. And immediately I had to decide, and I took off my mutual aid 12-step support hat, and I put on my recovery hat. And I told him that I'm not speaking for AA or any 12-step group. I am speaking simply man to man as a recovery coach, being of assistance and support. I think he's back on track, but it's very difficult sometimes managing our stuff, and we have to sometimes turn on a dime to make sure that we are doing right for our people we are working with, and that we are doing right for ourselves and other groups that support a maintenance or a abstinence-based program. So I just needed to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ed, so much. Glad you're here. Becky. How you doing?
So the first time I heard about harm reduction was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And at first I was like, no, I struggled with it. And then my trainer that was training us at that time, he said, so why would you take a recovery pathway and put it in a box? And I took that home that night, and I kept on thinking about it, and it kept on playing in my head. And I got to thinking, I wasn't taking the recovery path and putting it in a box. I was taking my art and putting it in a box. Instead of being open to learning and learning more things, I was putting myself in a box saying, I can't learn no more. I can't, believe in anything else. So it's helped me to remove those walls and no longer live in a box and learn more about like harm reduction and MAT and all that kind of stuff out there. And it's broadened my horizons greatly. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Becky. Kelly and then Charles.
So I'm going to say something that might be slightly controversial, but from my experience in 12-step communities, in inpatient facilities, and in clinical outpatient agencies, I've found that a lot of the time people's misgivings about harm reduction or their open-mindedness towards harm reduction is sort of based around this need to decenter their either real or imagined expertise. And I know, like in academia, it's around people that have, you know, a higher degree of learning, or an MD, or, you know, years and years of this like higher education that gives them this expertise, and that anything that goes outside of that is, you know, enabling, or it's neglectful, or it's this or it's that. And then in 12 steps, you know, it's decentering this idea that time is the only thing that should matter when it comes to someone's expertise or leveraging that lived experience. So I think that a lot of the opposition to harm reduction comes along with a lack of humility, and a lack of willingness to appropriately decenter our expertise, whether it's real or not. And that's something that I've noticed a lot of people struggle with. I work in a big inpatient, I work in a hospital, I work in the biggest hospital in upstate New York, and I do education, and I'm just a peer, you know, I'm not going to fucking college. I don't care. I don't need to go. I'm good at what I do without it. So let me do my thing. But people look at me like I don't deserve to be in the rooms that I am because I'm just a peer. But if people would decenter themselves and their voice and their, you know, experiential knowledge, then they would see that a lot of this stuff makes more sense than what has been in the DSM-5. So I do think that a lot of these conversations require humility that maybe some people, at least in academia and some of the old timers in the rooms, aren't exactly willing to have.
I'm glad you said that. So I started off with saying, I want you to open your mind and your heart today, right? Right. And receive what we're talking about today in humility. So I don't disagree with you, actually, at all. So it might be controversial to others. Let's say, Charlie, what's up, brother? Great to see you, man.
Yo, Dom, what's up, baby? I just want to say that prior to going to CCAR training and learning about being a coach, I too was one of those NA Nazis, and I thought that NA way, you know, NA was the only way. And Domenick has known me for many years, and I am a diehard. Either you do it or you ain't doing it, and that, you know, because that's how I did it. But I found that since I went to training, it has opened my mind to something so special that it has helped me in all of my, on like every area of my life, as far as my daughter or my wife or anybody, like just being that open-minded and not so closed-minded of saying, this is the way things are in all areas. I think that, you know, this is a big deal, because I think when you open up your mind to things other than what you think you know, I believe that it brings more connection to people, and it brings more people to me than it brings them away from me, because I always start with good intentions, but it doesn't always mean that I get the good outcomes if I'm not open-minded. And that is one of the things that I learned from being a coach, you know, because I was one of those people that either you're getting clean or you ain't getting clean, you know what I mean? And that's it, you know, and I am just grateful that I was able to get something in this hard head of mine that is not just that way.
Absolutely. Love that. Love that, and love you, brother. You already know. You already know. Go ahead, Patrick.
Hey guys, thanks for all of this, and I really appreciate what some folks have been saying. You know, I have a client who, after 3 years of trying to navigate a 12-step program, has made the decision that she wants to try harm reduction. And I'm you know, comfortable with multiple different pathways of recovery. I know that what's worked for me doesn't necessarily work for other people. My challenge with having worked with her now over the last couple of months as she's navigating it, is that a lot of the same things are happening to her through harm reduction, and her drug of choice is alcohol. So a lot of the same behaviors and things that are happening as she's trying to navigate harm reduction are the same as when she was in a 12-step program. So my challenge, I guess, a little bit is how do I sort of point out that and help her set some boundaries, and she's tried that and sort of run through the guardrails, the boundaries, then those lines that we all try to set when using or drinking. My challenge, and I'm still there, I'm still listening, and we're talking, which is great, but my challenge is really how to sort of help her, and maybe she'll decide, so I'm talking to myself here a little bit, maybe she'll decide that it's okay to have these things still happen, the blackouts, the drunk dialing, all of that. She may decide now that it's okay, that she wants to keep doing that. But so that's my struggle right now, I guess, is, we understanding that this is the pathway of recovery, but seeing the same patterns of behavior in her that she had described when she was in 12-step and before she even found recovery at all. So that's where I am right now, struggling with that.
So do you feel like it's a struggle? So this is me just being a coach for a second, right?
Sure.
Coaching, because that's what we do. We coach coaches, right? So
Yep.
do you think maybe you're having a hard time kind of not attaching yourself to the outcome? I mean, it's happened to me a million times, so
Absolutely.
I'm speaking from experience. Okay.
Absolutely. There is definitely that. And I can back away a little bit, at times, but it is, I try to frame and sort of have her talk about, in a way, sort of why is it okay now to do these things when what we talked about a year ago, you were ashamed about and couldn't deal with, those kinds of things. So it's just an interesting challenge for me right now. So I'm learning a lot today.
Absolutely. So something that I used to do, because I've worked the harm reduction model with many, many people. Matter of fact, one of the guys came and spoke at actually like throughout my years here, like 4 different individuals that started off as harm reduction here at CCAR have achieved a long-term recovery, right? Whether that be via medication, 12-step, whatever their chosen pathway, right? But they were able to find it because I worked a model where like I asked them what their goal was. And if their goal, and I was like, don't tell me what you want me to hear. If it's not abstinence, don't tell me it's abstinence. What is your goal right now? Like at this very minute, well, I just don't want to drink today. Okay, let's not drink today. What do you want to do? And I would go with him somewhere or try to like be that, like Jennifer brought up a great thing of before, an hour at a meeting or an hour at a coffee shop is an hour that he wasn't drinking, or he wasn't blowing coal, or he wasn't shooting dope, or he wasn't, just an hour, right? Sometimes that's how it starts. To think that I'm going to change every single person's mind or change the way they think. Nobody has the power to do that. Even like Freud at the end struggled to really understand consciousness, right? Like, what is the collective consciousness and the psyche? What is it really? Like, some things are unexplainable and better left unexplained so that we can explore and grow, right?
Great.
I think we don't always need an answer, man. Just be like, hey, what's your goal for now? And like whatever that goal is, be like, okay, what pieces will help you to reach that goal? And if it's like one day, I just don't drink for today, that's a real small goal. We can get through that. Let's do it together, right? So, and it could be anything, man. But like really, like for me as a coach, man, it's always like, hey, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like in that approach, that approach, and sometimes people will continue to use, and if they want to continue to use, we have to love them right where they're at and say, okay, you want to use, that's fine. Like, I'm always going to be here to support you. I had this young man reach out to me yesterday. Probably the youngest kid I ever worked with. He was 14. And I was allowed to work with him only because he came through the MPD program. Or no, he was 15. I apologize. came through the MPD program, but he was already had been on opiates for like almost 4 years, you know, and like, he just called me the other day. I gave him his space and he's like, Dom, I want to start over. I want to start over, bro. And I'm like, yo, let's get some breakfast. I'm like, you can come with me Friday night to the meeting. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm like, but we'll at least do breakfast. Let's start small, right? And he doesn't have to come with me to the meeting, but he used to love to come with me to the meeting. So I'm not asking him to do something that he didn't want to do to begin with.
Right.
So he used to be like, yo, can you pick me up, Dom? You know, and I'd pick him up and he'd come out to the meeting with me. So, you know, whatever it takes, and it's not what Domenick thinks, it's what treating people as their own best resource. Sometimes people know the answer. They just need somebody to love them enough where they can figure it out. That's it. You know, for me, man, that's my experience with it. So on to the next question. I know we're going to get to these scenarios though. So do you as an individual / coach still struggle? And I want you guys to be really honest with this, right? And I know there's a lot of harm reduction, you know, savvy people in here. But as an individual or a coach, do you still struggle with paths that don't align to your own? Awesome, Meredith, thank you.
At first I was like, no, right? And then you're like, just really be honest, think about it. And I'm like, okay. Because I was just saying something to a sponsee who loves NA, which is, you know, where I got clean and where I am now, but I see the judgment all the time. But anyway, back to this. So I've never seen anyone stay clean or sober in SMART, SMART or whatever. And that's probably because I don't go to it. You know, I mean, you know, if we're gonna be, you know, I don't like to sit here and just say shit to say shit. You know, that's not why I got clean. But the people that I do know that do it, they've never been able to stay clean, you know, but they haven't stayed clean in AA either. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it. So I'm putting that out there.
No, I love that. So there's also reverse stigma too, right? Because things that have actual data as evidence, right? They'll be like, oh, 12-step don't work. There's no evidence. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, people do. So there's like a reverse. So I'm telling you, stigma is very much the reason I love doing this and I love coming together as a community is because we don't know what we don't know. And how do we get to know stuff? We need other people. There is a collective consciousness in the world. Well, anyway, before I get on my spiritual stuff, but we need each other. This is how we grow. Okay, this is where the essence of love lives, man. So no, thank you for that. Jackie, go ahead.
Hi, that's why I came to this class, because being a former worker in the field and being a mental health assistant and being in 2007 and seeing how this whole recovery coach, peer support specialist has changed for me, harm reduction is very important. And sitting on the other side of that, coming off a relapse of 16 years clean, and I just celebrated a year last week. It is very, very, very scary for me. And the question that you asked, yes, even though I'm in a gray area and I'm very grateful, after I took the recovery coach training class just Thursday, I was on an empowerment group and I looked at someone who really helped me along the way, and I could tell there was something wrong with her. And I'm going through my own stuff coming off the pink cloud of having a year. Thank God I got the gift. It took me 3 years to get this one. And as bad as I want to help someone else, I was able to call her and say, hey, thank you for being a part of my life. Like, you really helped me. I really struggle with being in this area. I am familiar with the program, but hey, thank you. And you know what she said? You know, sometimes people really need to hear that. And she's also a recovery coach too. And, you know, just it brought me out of myself just a little bit. And, you know, it was like we recovery coached each other. And it was both harm reduction because we were both in a bad space. And, you know, so recovery coach and the pathway, you said, how does it not work? You know, the stigma. I appreciate everyone here. And I was so excited when you said this harm reduction. I was like, I'm gonna get here. I gotta get here. I heard a lot of good things. I hear you, Mark, like so loud and clear. And the girl who talked about she works in a big hospital, it could be very damaging if you don't take care of yourself as a recovery coach and keep your own self and your own side of the street clean, you know. I just know for me, it's great information. I'm not ready. I'm still working on myself. I have a lot of issues. I know that Domenick thinks. I'm just so grateful for CCAR and what it has done over the years. The guy who said he has worked in the court system. Thank God. Like, thank God. I'm just really grateful to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that. Jennifer.
Yeah, I started off also in the 12 steps. And I very much got caught up in the, 12 steps are the only way and so forth and so on. And the struggle I have today, because I have stepped away from so much like 12-step involvement, is falling into they are so wrong about everything. That's kind of where my struggle is. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have got the start that I had without the support of those groups. So I don't want to fall into like completely dismissing them, but I have seen a lot of changes over the years, and a lot of groups got more and more religious, which is a turnoff for a lot of people, and people got more and more rigid, abstinence or nothing. And I can't operate like that. That was not my way. It's not how I got to abstinence. I went through a whole series of things before I figured out abstinence is what Jennifer needed. Or not because a bunch of people were telling me. I had to live it and figure it out for myself. So why can't we afford other people the opportunity to figure that out for themselves? But especially when it comes to some of the medication-assisted treatments. If you're taking Suboxone, whatever, different rant. But that is my struggle now, is not to go too far the other way. I got the chance to figure it out. I want to give other people the chance to figure it out for themselves. Who am I to tell you it has to be one way or the other?
Thank you, Jennifer. So I must say though, for me, mostly everything, my entire understanding on how the disease of addiction actually works actually comes from the basic text. Most of my knowledge and my understanding of exactly how it works. So this is the beauty of multiple paths. Though I am very much into holistic stuff now, and I'm very much into multiple paths, I also see the value in the information that was given to me. I guess you could say, we call them predecessors. How about even a step further, by my ancestors, by those people who came before me that have this knowledge that I need to obtain in order to, you know what I mean? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's even evidence challenging the traditional disease model. So there's that, so again, I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go with it is absolutely a disease. That's just me. That's just me.
Yes, but there's also which came first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, does the brain and that damage come in from the drug use, or does that damage lead to the drug use? So there's a lot of credible evidence saying that, it's not where we start. Yes, it's where we end up, but it's not where we start. So it is a challenge to the traditional disease model. So yeah, there's, so much going on. If we don't pay attention, we're going to get left behind. But it does absolutely inform the way I try to coach people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. So we're coming up on our 2 scenarios. I see all the hands. We're gonna take all the hands. So I'm gonna take the hands in a row. No more hands because we have to get to the scenario. So I'm gonna take Mark, Deborah, Nate, and then Samantha, and then we're gonna move on to the scenario. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'll make this as brief as I can. So by nature, I'm a fixer. And one thing that I know about being a fixer is that it doesn't help people heal. And so when I hear someone who wants to do something that I'm opposed to, my biggest challenge is not letting it show up on my face, right? Because in that reaction is judgment to somebody who is expressing their needs, their desires, their intuition for how they need to proceed. And I'm just going to say that when something happens that I don't agree with, I have to get out of my own way so I can help them, right? And so the one thing I always fall back on is that motivational interviewing question. Like for me, that alarm is a request for more information, right? And I want them to fully understand what they're saying too. So I'll ask them some good open-ended questions so they can explain to me more fully. Like, play the tape forward for me. How's this going to turn out, right? That's how I like to proceed. It is hard. I won't deny it because I have my lived experience and my own lessons, but they're my lessons, not their lessons. And that's where I try to remember every time when I go into a coaching session. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. You should think about becoming a facilitator sometime. Mike's in here. He's a good guy to talk about. Yeah, I think you'd actually be great, man.
I'm already a facilitator.
Oh, okay. Well, then it makes sense, brother. Then it makes sense to me. I get it. Good job, Mark. Thanks, bro. Go ahead, Deborah.
Hi there. I just kind of wanted to working in Detroit. Detroit is a very 12-step based community, a very NA based community. So facilitating classes, I sometimes run into that opposition a lot. But to frame this into the last comment on the slide, I took another training on harm reduction, and a certain amount into that training, I went into the training like, golly gee, yes, I'm all for harm reduction, you know? And about 6 hours into that training, I discovered about myself that I was all about harm reduction if it was a pathway to abstinence. And that is not always going to be everybody's choice. So a kind of realignment of that thought process was pretty interesting for me. Thank you.
No, thank you, Deborah. So that's exactly why I'm asking these questions, right? Is it only a pathway when it leads to abstinence, right? That's why we're talking about us as individuals and our art of coaching, and like, have we left space for them? You know what I mean? Go ahead, Nate. Oh, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey, good afternoon. I was enjoying a lot of the things I was hearing. And I've been a 12-stepper since 1991. You know, I was homeless and all that stuff. You know, I was a dope fiend back then. And 12 steps saved my life. And I've been a harm reductionist since 96. I went to the first conference and I got information about how to help save lives. To me, harm reduction is a way to help people save lives. It's not about what my recovery is one thing, but me helping a person. I mean, that's why I love CCAR and the Recovery Coach Academy. Is about helping that person find their path, whatever it is. That's my little motto is, you like it, I love it. And I really, really mean that. So, and I stay out of the way. And I love the piece about me managing my own stuff. Some things people say, some things I've heard on here today fire me up, but I don't, respond to it. They have a right to believe what they want to believe. And so being a coach or being a promoter or an advocate for this way of life, I think I'm more of an advocate for what we do in terms of helping people find their own way. And so I'm just grateful, man. I was running a little bit late, but I made it. So I'm liking what I'm hearing, Dominique. Don't know you, but look forward to meeting you someday.
Absolutely. Likewise, Nate. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Samantha, and then we're going to move to the scenario.
I guess sometimes for me, it's almost like I have a little maybe stigma when people can't relate to harm reduction, because harm reduction is what my path to recovery looks like. I've been off of methadone for 11 years and then off of OxyContin for 12. And it did not lead to abstinence for me either, which I guess I didn't realize that a lot of people felt a certain way about that. So I guess sometimes I almost feel like I'm the outcast, or I should feel embarrassed by like sharing or believing in my, what my recovery looks like. And I'm not ever honestly trying to get to abstinence completely. And yet I still lead a productive, healthy life. And I'm in recovery to myself. So I guess I didn't even realize maybe that there was so many stigmas, or people had so much feeling around it, because I think a lot of times with harm reduction too, it's kind of an isolating experience. Like if you're, I got methadone from my doctor. I didn't go to a clinic. So I wasn't doing meetings. I was kind of just working through recovery on my own at that point. So I guess I just didn't even know all the feelings maybe that people had about it. So sometimes it's hard for me when I think, when I hear what other people's paths look like, where it's, meetings and it has to be completely, abstinence. You have to change all your friends, I didn't, I guess, take that route. I just changed myself, and actually I didn't change all my friends. I didn't change everything.
I don't know about anybody else in here, but I am super curious to know what your path of recovery is. I am wicked curious. Would you mind sharing? You don't have to. Would you mind sharing?
No, I mean, I honestly think for me that probably the same doctor, that prescribed me methadone pills when I wanted to get off OxyContin was probably the same doctor that was selling OxyContin on the streets that I was buying. And I think he probably knew that, to be honest. He's in prison now for over prescribing. But I'm still very grateful, because when I went to him, he asked me, like, did I want Suboxone? Did I want methadone? At the time, methadone was easier, so that I could just, get the pills. It was less expensive. And he really felt like that would just help me change my habits. Like I would have more free time during the day because I wasn't looking for pills on the street. I'd have more money, because I wasn't spending it on illegal drugs. And he was right. That was kind of just the boost that I needed. But one of my, dealers of OxyContin was my best friend's parents. And so I wasn't able to cut everything out of my life. I really just had to kind of realize, I think by the time I went to take the methadone, that I just didn't want to be in that life anymore. And then I also, tell people, I think it's so important to say that, when you decide you want to get clean, I don't think it's like your life necessarily always gets better right then. Like my life got more difficult because I think you're more aware of everything that's going on. You don't have this, way to numb it all out. So for a while, being sober just seems extra hard. Like it almost seems like life was easier.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and being vulnerable. I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you so much. So we are going to jump into this bad boy right here. So I have a two-part scenario, okay? So I'm going to ask you to keep your mind open and to be absolutely honest as I read this to you, okay? So I'm going to ask you a question after. So why don't we all close our eyes? Let's try this. Let's exercise like this. Why don't we all close our eyes? Take a moment, close your eyes. I'm going to read you a scenario, and I want to know how you feel and what your first thought was. Okay, this is called confronting our bias. Okay, so you and John have been attending the same 12-step meeting for years, and you consider him to be a friend. John is an awesome guy, always loving and supportive to others in the rooms. You have known him for a long time and know he has had struggles with his mental health. He has even spoken about thoughts of suicide and that he has struggled to find any medication that works. Last week, he celebrated multiple years in recovery at the meeting you were at. And after, you went to get some food with him to celebrate his anniversary. While having a deep conversation with him, he brings up his mental health in conversation, and he tells you that he found a medication that has been working. He discloses to you that he has gotten his medical marijuana card, and it has been life-changing for him. And open your eyes. First thoughts, honesty. Police.
Great. I'm glad you're feeling better. Like, that's my immediate response. Amazing.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, you feel that way. I love that. Meredith.
So, as somebody who like had like memories come back, like, so when I had like 7 or 8 years, I'd had this trauma memory come back that I never knew existed. So mental health wise, like, yeah, echo the prior share, like, I'm just glad you're okay. It may not, it's not okay for me today, who knows about tomorrow, but I'm just glad they're okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Meredith. Tanya.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, well, considering I've known John for years, I probably have a good idea of when John is feeling good and when he's not, and especially considering he's suffered from depression where he's actually considered suicide. If I'm seeing that John is happy and seems to be in a good place and is working at program, then I'm going to support John. I'm going to be happy for him.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya. Stan.
Yeah, whatever works for him works for him. It's not my place to dictate what's good for him and what's not. That's up to him to decide.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stan. Jackie.
Good for you. Just don't smoke that shit around me.
Jackie, love that. Love that. Jackie, we can always rely on Jackie to keep it a buck. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that. Charlie, go ahead.
Hey, Dom. I know as a recovery coach, the first thought that comes to my head is, I am glad that the person is doing well. But my NA side of me says, oh man, that's a red light for me. So that's something that I am still trying to work on, trying to just being open-minded, you know what I mean? Just being honest about it, just trying to be truthful, that is something that I struggle with still.
And you know what? I so appreciate that, Charlie, because that's what I'm looking for. So some of us might feel like, some of us that are coaches or don't, might not identify with the same path, might think that this is a no-brainer question, but it's really not, because bias and stigma and things that our belief systems that we have, when somebody challenges your belief system, it does something to you. And it's not the coaches that have biases that are that I'm worried about. It's those of us that can't confront our biases that I am worried about, because some people have that deep rooted, like, oh, this dude ain't clean. What the hell is he doing? He's smoking dope. Like, they're gonna they're gonna jump on it. Like, they're gonna jump on it, and not just 12-step either. That's the thing too. Like, stigma is very real in all paths of recovery, and we can't, as a community, keep fighting each other for the bit and nail, man. Like, we're fighting each other. We're fighting as our brothers and sisters die. We are too worried about, basically, we're too worried about time instead of quality of life. And that's the truth, right? So go ahead, Kelly. Love you, Charlie. Thank you for that, bro.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's a really big deal. And the way that I usually I'm like, why is that my business even though? Because I think Lori said it in the chat, it's been happening without my permission or knowledge for who knows how long. But I think of it like, would my reaction have been different if he was like, yeah, I am feeling a lot better. I'm on whatever, like Lamictal, or I'm on some other mental health medication, would it really be that different? And I think about it too from like the professional standpoint, because I work and train a lot of people in recovery who are recovery coaches and recovering professionals. And there's almost this like, people feel entitled to transparency and to our stories and to our clean time. And it's like, if I disclose that I am in recovery to my workplace or to people that I am friends with, it's almost like I'm giving up the opportunity to have my recovery be a private process of betterment. It then becomes open for interpretation, open for judgment, and up for discussion. So it's like, things are no longer really benevolent when they're advertised. So I think that there's a lot of sort of insidious things that get put into our head coming up in these like very strict 12-step environments, because somebody's medication is never my fucking business, ever, whether it's for diabetes, whether it's for mental health, whether it's for GERD. Like, I wouldn't care if somebody came up and was like, dude, I have such bad heartburn, I just got put on this like crazy extra strength Tums. It's like, I didn't ask, but cool, I hope it goes well for you. It's the same thing as this for me. So I feel like sometimes we trick ourselves into thinking that like we're not allowed privacy or like the sacredness of that, having things that are just between us and God or us and our higher power. And I wish people would mind their business more.
Me,
In all areas and arenas of life, man, just mind your business a little bit more.
absolutely, absolutely. So I love that. I love that. So I'm gonna take Becky and Robin. Sorry, Robert, but I want to get to the second part, but there's a twist to this that I want you to understand. Okay. That this scenario that I have put before you is real life. This really happened to somebody. And when we get to the next part, I want you to know why, when we started this training, I felt the way I did, and why this John was my friend. So when we get to this second part, you'll know why I put this in here. Okay. Go ahead, Becky.
So yeah, at first I would be honored that he felt comfortable enough to come to me and talk to me about what he's found to help himself. But at the same time, I would struggle because personally, I know somebody that they say their gateway to other drugs is marijuana, right? And so that would be in the back of my head. And even though I'm dealing with this one person, I still have that in the back of my head. I can't just get rid of it, right? So I would still struggle with that, but I would feel honored that they actually came to me as a friend and was able to disclose that to me, and that they're doing great. So just as long as they're doing great with it, you know, it's not for me to say, like Kelly was saying, it's not my business. So.
Absolutely. I think what John was doing is he was looking for support from those people that said that they were his friends and they loved him. I think that's what he was looking for, because he had known him for years. John had been there for years. And what happened to John, and this is not his real name, but what happened to John was broke my heart. So we're going to get to our second part.
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely, Kelly. Go ahead.
this is also saying like, this is just our homie from the rooms too, right?
Yes.
This isn't like my recovery. This is just like my boy. We've been going to meetings. We got it out the mud together. Let's go out to eat. Boom.
Yeah. Well, so this is somebody from the rooms, right? I based the scenario on that, but this is also to get you to think about coaching too, right? So I just want you to know that how impactful and that this scenario is real life and happens all the time. So I just want you to see that this scenario, and the next part, like, this happens and it's real life. So my emphasis is on meeting people where they're at and loving people where they're at, and stop, like you said, sometimes it's none of our damn business, dude. Like, my business as a recovery coach is to help support, promote recovery, treat people with respect, dignity. You know what I mean? Like, my job is very clear, and not only as a coach, man, but as a decent human being, man. Okay, basic human decency. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm, so go ahead, Glenn. And then we're gonna move to the next one.
I look at the question, how it's written. He was celebrating years of recovery, not years of clean time or not years of sobriety, was celebrating his recovery. And I go back to the basics of recovery coaching. You are in recovery when you say you are.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. But see, where John was, that's not, so this is about somehow changing the mindset of culture, right? And changing those thought processes that somebody is undeserving of that same love and validation because their recovery looks different, right? Your recovery looks different than mine, so therefore you're not in recovery, right? That, like, somebody said something about like that self-entitlement, I think it was Kelly, like that, was it self-entitlement, like that like, feeling of like my recovery is it, it's the say all be all, and like that's just what it is, right? Like that's where it's gotten to, and that's not, that's not where it started. It started with a desire and with some love and compassion for the still sick and suffering, right? And we have a disease of addiction. So at least that's my standpoint. You don't even have to believe that it's a disease. My experience, it tells me that it is a disease for me. So like I said, I'm not trying to indoctrinate you. I'm just trying to open up your mind to, and especially to, the poison of stigma is what the next one is called. So I just asked if everybody could, again, just close your eyes, and I'm going to read this next one to you. We do this in Coach Revision. I actually just did a training before this, so I like this whole close your eyes thing. So just sit and listen to what I'm going to read you, and then tell me what you think. So scenario part 2, the outcome. So days after, in a moment of judgment, you told somebody that attends the same meeting about John's new medication. People have begun to gossip about John, and they tell him that he is not clean or in recovery. People have made him so uncomfortable that he stops going to meetings and loses his connection to recovery meetings and support. After some time, he has had a mental health episode, and he uses because of all the shame and guilt inflicted by the stigma. John had bought a bag of fentanyl and suffers an accidental overdose. John loses his life, but the thing is, he was found by somebody who unfortunately did not have naloxone and did not know how to help him. By the time the ambulance got there, John was already dead. Just want you to think about that for a minute. How did you feel knowing because of stigma and because of the way people treated John that he lost his life? Go ahead, Jackie.
Anonymity is the most important thing. I would never say nothing to nobody. Anonymity is spiritual foundations. Ever reminded us to place principles before personalities. I don't know. I have a lot of my own personal stuff, and I see a lot of it. Newcomers should be told. And I go to a lot of Zoom meetings. I don't judge people. People are people. I've seen a lot of things happen in the rooms. And I just have to keep my own side of the street clean. Poor John. I could pray for the person who I'm not today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I can only agree with Jackie. I mean, anonymity in the rooms, whether you're in a peer meeting or a 12-step meeting, isn't just not telling people who are in there. It's also keeping confidential things that people share with us about their own recovery. right? So I need to be impeccable with how I use my words. I think it's a false equivalent to take the last scenario and tie it to the overdose that he experiences, because as an addict, I know that I am liable to act out of old behaviors and through compulsions based on my mental health challenges that I'm facing at the time. And so the scenario that was created, whether it was because it was a word dropped about his choice of medical assisted therapy, or maybe something he was doing, acting out sexually with somebody, you know, in community somewhere, could still have the same effect, and he could still act out just the same as that. So I don't really see him as being connected, him going to his medical marijuana, as much as an issue with people being impeccable with their word and keeping people's confidence, right? And not sharing that information in groups of people, or especially other people may have a problem with it, right? My recovery is my business. Am I living a good life? Am I living in recovery? Am I not having consequences? Am I being productive? Am I meeting all those models that we talked about at the beginning of this course, what recovery is? If that's the case, then leave me alone, right? Leave that person be. It's my opinion. Thanks.
Mark? Robert?
I think your question was, how does this make us feel? And it makes me feel disgusted, angry, ashamed. You know, I'm only one step away from someone saying that to me and feeling the same way, right? Given my own recovery and my own mental health wellness. I think for me, it just brings out the highlight that I need to inform the person that I support that this may exist in the room that they go and visit. And how do we navigate this because of that stigma? You know, I work with people who have, you know, these co-occurring diagnoses, and, you know, they say you're chewing your booze or you're substituting, and the reality is that's none of their business, and that can have some really dire implications on that person's well-being. Who, you know, I remember working with somebody who had like 50 something overdoses in their time of life and struggled getting 1 year of recovery. And when I started supporting them, I shared my lived experience. I prepared them like, hey, these are like the environments that we're going to go in. These are the potential outcomes that might happen. And I'm very blessed to know that to this day, they've been able to maintain at least 6 years of sobriety on their own, you know, and that's been huge, even with going to the halls in preparation of knowing that something like this can exist. I know had it been me in this situation, I would feel guilty. That I feel just as responsible for John's death because of that judgment, being part of that group.
Thank you, Robert. It's also an ethical thing, right? Iatrogenic harm. So think about the recovery coach, first recovery role too, right? So sorry I got emotional, but this is a real story and I love that, man. So go ahead, Kelly.
I could hear in your voice, Dom, that this is still something that's clearly very fresh. And I hope that part of what you're doing with this work is a living amends, because I know that mine is. I have a John, his name was Nick, and I watched him come into the rooms and get this very esteemed old timer with 30 years clean, every key tag in the books. Everyone adored this man. He was a circuit speaker, this, that, and the other thing. And I watched Nick come in week after week, forced to get a new white key tag because he chose to smoke a joint before bed or have a fucking beer with dinner. And now he's dead. And he's dead because he was dragged up in front of the entire home group for months on end, week after week, told and invalidated and belittled. And so finally he got to the point where he says, you know what, I'm not even doing dope. I'm not even shooting dope like I want to. I'm just smoking this stupid joint or having this dumb beer. So you know what, I'm gonna go shoot dope. And now he's dead. And I think that this is what happens when we shield ourselves behind this old-fashioned notion that what our parents did has to be what we do in terms of like the elders of recovery. I know that for a lot of people, I'm not abstinent. I never have been. I practice conditional abstinence, meaning I won't shoot dope. I don't take pills. I don't do anything but have an occasional drink or two in a safe environment with my family or with my partner or when I'm out with my friends. but I refuse to let anyone in the rooms or at my job or anywhere else treat me like I don't deserve to claim these 8 years that I have, because I have sweat and bled for them. And I wish that we could just be kinder to each other. I wish that it didn't have to come up with this one-upness or this idea that recovery is anything but a spiritual process of betterment and redemption. That's all it is. It's all it is. It's not about making it to the next cake cutting or getting a new coin. Who gives a fuck? You know, and I feel like at some point we got so far away from what the core spirit of recovery is, which is community. And it started being about who's got better what, or who's got more what, or who can have more, you know, hospitals and institutions commitments, and who does more service, dude. And they're still dying. So what is all this service work even for? Nobody new is coming and all the young ones are leaving. So who are we holding space for? Sorry, I just went on a whole thing, but this is very much a part of why I do the work that I do, because I feel like I could have been a much better advocate for my friends, and I'll be damned if I let anyone else feel like I didn't step up for them when I'm fully capable and now happy to, and empowered with the tools to. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Kelly. Meredith?
Yeah, so thanks, Dominic. And thanks for your vulnerability. People tell me this all the time, so I'm just gonna tell you, don't apologize. Like, I hope that's not out of place, but I'm not gonna say sorry. All right, so this made me mad, sad, and scared. And again, just I'll just self-disclose, like I'm not even a recovery coach, but just I'll be vulnerable and say that I had like my PTSD, the shit that like I remembered like that happened for several years over time. I had to insert it in my life mentally, right? And so that really fucked me up, I'm grateful I didn't use over it. It doesn't make me any better or less than somebody that does use over stuff, but I did feel I felt a really big stigma, I mean, there are, mental health meds, like somebody said something about they got shit for taking Prozac. I experienced the same, like just like something like similar to Prozac, I'm sure it is, but like, and I had to go to like an inpatient place clean for trauma. And when I got back, like everyone treated me like shit, and everyone was treating me like shit before, because I was just struggling, just socializing and stuff, and their BS, their like stigma of me, and like just creating all kinds of stories. Like, I don't even know what all, like it kept me from going to my home group. And and then I ended up moving up to Philly for a few years, but that was for a different reason. But anyway, so I'm really glad you shared this. I used to be very black and white NA, like da 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 da, but I'm also in a sponsorship family tree that is like that, and I remain open to the possibility of changing that. So thanks.
Thank you. Now so we only have 4 minutes. I'm gonna take another hand, but I want to put this up here for you to look at. Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you, Dominic. Just very quickly, my immediate reaction was great sadness, and that was followed by an immense sense of gratitude that I am a recovery coach. When you started the diagram and you introduced John, I mentioned earlier today I received a phone call before this training. He was also a John. He was named John. I think being in long-term recovery in the rooms, I think when someone relapses, I think many of us, and I was at one time that way, afraid that relapse is contagious. And sometimes I think we react so strongly and in such a negative because of fear that it will happen to me, so stay away from me. It's not contagious. I think the thing that I learned as a recovery coach is this openness and this willing to look at people of who they are and where they are, and that acceptance allows me to be there for them. And for that, I appreciate it. And I so sorry for John, your friend.
Yeah. Nate, we got 2 minutes. It's the last hand I can take. I do apologize to anybody else that wanted to share. Nate, go ahead. We got 2 minutes. And then I have to bring it to a close.
I just wanted to say that one of the reasons why I'm grateful for the peer recovery coach movement is because of situations like this, where the coach can coach the recovery up on the situation that they're going into and help them understand that people recover at different rates, and their pathway is their pathway. We get tools to help people to get past some of that crap. You know, like I said, I've been in recovery consistently, not used anything for almost 32 years in October. And people have attacked me, all kind of stuff. And the good news is I didn't get high because I didn't want to get high. And I had the people in my corner that supported me in my recovery. And that's what we can help our recoveries understand, is we got to find a circle of people who support us. And the other thing I want to say about it is what happened to, you know, being ethical as a recovery coach. You don't share, if somebody shares something with you, you don't go back and tell anybody that. I mean, that should be, you know, part of how you walk and talk. You know, if you tell me something and I'm not letting it go anywhere. So thanks for letting me get my minute in. Don.
Thank you, Nate.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So what I put up here is that harm reduction is love and it is recovery.
Absolutely.
So that's everything that I wanted to share with you today. That is really what I wanted to share. That harm reduction is love and it is recovery. And if we can just get past our own bias, we'll be able to love people and help people in our communities, right? So I appreciate all of you. We can, Mike, you can stop recording. I'll stay for like 10, 15 minutes. I got nowhere to be. So if anybody wants to talk after, but the webinar has come to a close. So if anybody wants to leave.